If you believe in second chances, if you believe kindness can find its way back to the people who need it most, hit that like button right now, drop a comment below, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Vault so you never miss a story like this one. Marcus Whitfield had worked at Ashford Logistics for 9 years. 9 years of early mornings, missed dinners, and quiet pride in a job he did well. That morning, he stood in the glass-walled office of Gerald Ashford, the company's founder and CEO, clutching a termination letter he hadn't seen coming. Budget cuts, they called it. Restructuring. Gerald hadn't even looked up from his phone when he delivered the news, his voice flat and rehearsed, as if Marcus were a line item instead of a man who had a 7-year-old daughter waiting for him at home, a daughter who believed her father could fix anything, because he always had. Marcus drove home in silence that afternoon, the radio off, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. His daughter, Nora, was staying with her aunt for the week, which meant he had the apartment to himself, and the silence there was worse. He sat at the kitchen table for hours, staring at the letter, doing math in his head that never came out right. Rent. Nora's school fees. The medication her asthma required every month without fail. He had 3 weeks of severance and no plan beyond that. By midnight, sleep felt impossible, so Marcus did what he always did when his mind wouldn't quiet down, he drove. The rain had turned the streets into rivers of reflected light, and the roads outside the city were empty except for the hum of his old truck's engine. That was when he saw it. A car flipped onto its side in a drainage ditch off Route 9, its headlights still on, casting strange shadows through the downpour. He didn't think. He just stopped the truck, threw on his hazards, and ran through the rain toward the wreck. Inside, slumped against the crushed passenger door, was a man bleeding from his forehead, barely conscious, murmuring words Marcus couldn't understand. Marcus didn't recognize him at first, not in the dark, not with blood running down his temple and his silver hair matted flat against his skull. He pulled the man free with strength he didn't know he had, dragged him up the muddy embankment, and called for an ambulance with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't until the paramedics arrived, until the emergency lights washed over the man's face, that Marcus felt his stomach drop. It was Gerald Ashford. The same man who had ended his career that morning was now lying on a stretcher, alive only because Marcus had refused to keep driving. Marcus rode in the ambulance without fully understanding why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the version of himself that Nora believed in, the one who always did the right thing even when it cost him something. At the hospital, he sat in the waiting room for 3 hours, soaked to the bone, replaying the morning's humiliation and the night's chaos over and over, unable to reconcile how the same day could hold both. Gerald woke just after 4 in the morning. When the nurse mentioned that the man who pulled him from the wreck was still in the waiting room, Gerald insisted on seeing him, against doctor's orders, his voice hoarse but urgent. Marcus walked into that hospital room bracing for awkwardness, maybe even resentment, but instead he found a man who looked smaller than he had in that office. Stripped of his suit, his title, his composure, Gerald Ashford was just a person who had nearly died on a dark road, and the fear in his eyes was unmistakably human. Gerald didn't apologize right away. Instead, he asked Marcus why he stopped. Why would the man he fired hours earlier risk his own safety on a flooded road for him? Marcus didn't have some poetic answer ready. He simply said that his daughter was watching him, even when she wasn't in the room, and that he couldn't have lived with himself if he'd driven past someone in need, no matter who they were. Something in that answer seemed to break through decades of armor Gerald had built around himself. Over the following days, Gerald requested Marcus visit him again, then again, until it became less of a formality and more of an unspoken routine. Gerald spoke about his own son, estranged for years, about how he'd built an empire while losing the people who mattered most, measuring success in numbers instead of relationships. He confessed that the termination that morning had been rushed, a decision made under pressure from the board, and that he regretted the coldness with which he'd delivered it. Marcus listened without bitterness, because somewhere in that hospital room, he realized Gerald wasn't just his former boss anymore. He was a man given an unexpected second chance to see what truly mattered. When Gerald was discharged, he didn't just offer Marcus his job back. He created a new position entirely, one focused on employee welfare and workplace culture, insisting that no one at Ashford Logistics should ever feel like Marcus had felt that morning, discarded and unseen. He also personally covered Nora's medical expenses for the year, not as charity, but as gratitude for a kindness that had cost Marcus nothing to give and had meant everything to receive. Nora never fully understood the entire story, but she noticed her father smiling more, humming while he made breakfast, sitting a little taller when he came home from work. She used to tell him he could fix anything. Now, she was starting to believe that maybe he could fix people too, simply by choosing kindness even when the world had given him every reason not to. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that kindness can change a life in ways we never expect, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Kindness Vault, and share it with someone who might need this message today. And before you go, I have one small request. Please type kindness in the comments below, so we know you made it to the end of this story, and so this message of hope can keep reaching more hearts that need it. Because sometimes, the person you help in the dark is the very person who ends up bringing light back into your life, and sometimes, second chances aren't given, they're earned, one act of compassion at a time.